Hi Lena, hi Parker, hi Micah, it's Aunt Cindy and it's time for Aunt Cindy's book club. It's been a long time and I've missed you guys. What happened was I went on a trip and when I came back from the trip, I had a bad cold and I couldn't talk very well, but now I'm feeling better and so it's time for us to read together again. And today we have a special book called Curious George and the Firefighters. And you know, Lena's daddy, your Uncle Derek, or your daddy, is a firefighter. And we think firefighters are genuine heroes. We love them. They do such good work for everybody. So the next time you see Derek, you ask him about being a firefighter, and I'll bet he'll have some good stories to share with you. So here's our book about Curious George and the Firefighters. So find the first page of the story, which looks like this. This is Curious George the monkey and his friend, who's the man with the yellow hat, and they're going to the fire station. And remember, when you hear the bell, that means it's time to turn the page. Here we go. This is George. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. Today, George and his friend, the man with the yellow hat, joined Mrs. Gray and her class on their field trip to the fire station. The fire chief was waiting for them right next to a big red fire truck. Here's the fire chief, and here's the big red fire truck. "Welcome," he said, and he led everyone upstairs to begin their tour. There was a kitchen with a big table, and there were snacks for everyone. The fire chief told them all about being a firefighter. George tried hard to pay attention, but there were so many things for a little monkey to explore, like that shiny silver pole in the corner. Where did that pole go? George was curious. Why, it went back downstairs. There was the great big fire truck. There was a map of the city, and there was a whole wall full of coats and hats and big black boots. They're all the firemen's outfits. Their protective gear. George had an idea. First, he stepped into a pair of boots. Next, he picked out a helmet. And finally, George put on a jacket. He was a firefighter. Suddenly, bring! The firefighters all rushed in. "This is not my helmet," said one. "My boots are too big," said another. "Hurry, hurry," called the fire chief. A bright red light on the map of the city told him just where the fire was. There was no time to waste. One by one, the firefighters jumped into the fire truck, and so did George. And there they go, off to help with the fire. The fire truck with all the firefighters sped out of the firehouse, and so did George. The siren screamed and the lights flashed. The truck turned right, then it turned left. Woo, 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 went the whistle, and George held on tight. And just like that, the fire truck and all the firefighters pulled up to a pizza parlor on Main Street. Smoke was coming out of a window in the back and a crowd was gathering in the street. "Thank goodness you're here," cried the cook. The firefighters rushed off the truck and started unwinding their hoses. They knew just what to do, and George was ready to help. He climbed up on the hose reel. And there are the firefighters getting the hose out so they can put water on the fire. One of the firefighters saw George trying to help, and he took George by the arm and led him out of the way. "A fire is no place for a monkey," he said to George. "You stay here where it's safe." George felt terrible. George sat on the bench and looked around. Next to him on the ground was a bucket full of balls. George reached in and took one out. It fit in his hand just right, like the apple he'd had for a snack. What kind of ball do you think he found in that bucket? Think those are baseballs? I think so too. A little girl was watching George. He tried to give her the ball, but she was too frightened. George took another ball and another. "Look," a boy said, "that monkey is juggling." And there's George juggling the baseballs. The boy took a ball from the cage and tossed it to George, but it went too high. George climbed up onto the fire truck to get it. Now George had 4 balls to juggle. He threw the balls higher and higher. He juggled with his hands, he juggled with his feet. He could do all kinds of tricks. There he is up on the truck. The boy threw another ball to George. George threw a ball back to the boy. The little girl reached down and picked up a ball too. Soon all the children were throwing and catching back and forth. There they all are, throwing and catching baseballs. The fire chief came to tell everyone that the fire was out. Just then the little girl laughed and said, "Look, Mommy, a fire monkey." "Hey," called the fire chief, "what are you doing up there?" "What a wonderful idea," the little girl's mother said to the fire chief, "bringing this brave little monkey to help children when they're frightened." "Oh," the fire chief said, "well, thank you." He hadn't really thought about it, how George could be helpful. Before long, the fire truck was back at the firehouse where a familiar voice called, "George!" It was the man with the yellow hat. "This little monkey had quite an adventure," said one of the firefighters. "Is everyone all right?" asked Mrs. Gray. "Yes, it was just a small fire," said the fire chief, "and George was a big help." Now the field trip was coming to an end, but there was one more treat in store. All the children got to take a ride around the neighborhood on the shiny fire truck. And they each got their very own fire helmet, even George, and it was just the right size for a brave little monkey. And that's the end of our story. So I hope you learned that children and monkeys should not get in the way of firefighters, because firefighters are doing a very important and hard job. But it's okay if you help make other people feel less frightened and feel okay. I love you guys. I'll see you next time when it's time for Aunt Cindy's Book Club.